The tour will be in English, because Oliver unfortunately can't speak Croatian yet. And my German is rusty, yes. Okay. We counted it, we made already itinerary, and it will last 50 minutes. We have 6 stops, so it will be intense and dynamic. If you have questions, write it down, and Oliver will be happy to answer it after our guided tour. Oliver, so yes. Can we start?
Yes.
Okay. So we scheduled that here in this space, we will talk about the importance of civil disobedience. Oliver, present us briefly why the civil disobedience is key point to organize movement.
Yeah.
Please be loud.
So I focused a lot on climate and also followed this procedure in the framework of the United Nations to tackle carbon emissions, which I consider a complete failure. And therefore, I think our only chance in order to reduce carbon emissions are actually to involve in existing climate justice movements or to create new ones together with your friends. And for these climate justice movements, forms of civil disobedience are of big importance. Because I think the time for polite protest on the streets, the time for demonstrations only, it's over. The things are too urgent and we have too much to lose. Therefore, I think we have to go to the next level of confrontation. And here we are standing in a 6-channel video installation. These are kinds of documentations of different events of mass civil disobedience that happened between 2015 and 2019. And each of these films discusses one of these events where I was there, sometimes alone, sometimes supported by colleagues who helped me filming, and I created afterwards a work. So for example, here the second film, we see a blockade of one of the largest open pit coal mines in Germany, which is probably bigger than the size of the entire city of Zagreb. And it's the largest source of carbon emissions in Germany. And it's no way for one of the richest countries in the world to continue extracting coal. There's no need for it. It's just because there's no price tag on emitting carbon emissions. Even though it destroys the world and even though it destroys the livelihood for millions of people in the global south, and it will not last so long, and it will be comparable here in the north. So here we see this film is the blockade of the second largest coal harbor in the European Union, which is located in Amsterdam, and this was blocked for 7 hours. Here you see now a cow, but this film is about the Tzad. The Tzad can be considered the largest autonomous region in Europe. It emerged out of an occupation of a site where originally the city of Nantes and the French state were planning to build a new airport for Nantes. And the people living there were always opposed to it, and so they decided to fight against it. And in about 2008, this was occupied by, in the framework of a climate event. And since then, it has been occupied. Police attempted from time to time to evict it. But this also shows the resistance as it's possible. If you have people supporting you, people in solidarity can also prevent police from evicting a space. And yeah, this is what these works are about.
What I want you to underline and stress that some of these actions are actually successful, because in Croatia, in Zagreb, we have a pretty much sad experience that our actions are not so often successful.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the good example.
This work is a good example where you can also see how these two fields come together. On the one hand, you have a successful form of resistance where a new development or a climate destructive new infrastructure is prevented from being brought into the world. And on the other hand, this empty space where you have no state, no police to a certain extent, gives the people who live there the possibility to set up alternative structures of living. Or
to self-organize.
Alternative self-organized structures of living organized through grassroots decision-making processes. And I think this is so important, yeah?
Also, now maybe a few words of our new model army.
Right, right. So, as kind of placeholders, here we have these mannequins. You will find them in different locations here in the exhibitions. And I describe them as stand-in activists because they stand in for activists that are active, are protesting, are blocking in other areas around the globe. You have protests everywhere, in every single country on this globe. And all these protests are kind of connected. And here we have an exhibition kind of documenting, kind of pointing towards different forms of resistance. And those are the kind of the life-sized mannequins that also remind us and that give a direct relation also to the audience. They remind, through their shape, what they are wearing, of different outfits we see in certain mobilizations. So the woman in red over there comes out from an action during the COP21 in Paris in December 2015, when the main motto was, "Be the red line." It means that our governments failed us for decades in forming the red line that would enable our societies to continue in the future. Therefore, we need to form the red line this way and no longer. We don't accept any more additional climate destructive infrastructures. We are the red line. And that comes from an action where the majority of the participants were wearing these red dresses and kind of fun uniforms and different outfits.
Polar bear?
And the polar bear is also, it's an outfit that's being used very often, as of course this is one of the most well-known animals from which we know that it is at risk of extinction, just because, in the Arctic the ice sheets are melting. Polar bears are used to fish through being on these ice sheets, and they cannot continue with their way of life. And in Greenland, for example, they enter then the cities, endanger there the people, which never happened before, just because the rising temperatures, ice is melting. It has so many effects in different fields.
Also, the one important question about drill bits of these models.
We also have here, maybe not visible for everyone of you, we have here a tripod. And a tripod is a very important means that is being used in actions of civil disobedience. Usually it's being put in front of the door of a certain infrastructure, of a factory, or in a street where you want to hinder cars from passing. But this tripod here is a very specific tripod. because it's a tripod that is kind of based in drill bits. And these are drill bits that are being used by the petroleum industry to extract petroleum. But we all know that in time of a climate emergency, petroleum should stay there where it's the safest, in the ground. And therefore, I think we have to fight that petroleum is being left in the ground. And what to do with the drill bits? Well, we could use them for civil disobedience, and therefore you have kind of a prototype for an kind of a modification of a tripod of using drill bits.
Thank you. And now we're going to move just around the corner to learn how to organize civil disobedience. Follow us. Watch out for the cables and the new model
our
army.
Friends here.
Yes. Follow us.
Is it too long or?
No, no, it's okay. I'm measuring time.
Okay. Maybe we should go there. It's better for the image.
So we underlined the importance of civil disobedience, and now Oliver will say a few words on how to organize civil disobedience. Oliver, please.
Yeah. So this is a film that shows us actually one of the rare documents that show us of how these acts of civil disobedience, we can see in the 6-channel video installations, are organized. So what we have here is a film based on a 4-hour-long assembly that took place in October 2019 in Madrid. And the reason for this assembly was that different delegates from social and ecological movements and activist groups met together to plan an act of civil disobedience, namely the blockade of a major street in front of the Ministry for Environmental Affairs. And of course, there are not so many documents of these assemblies for the reason because these are things that are being illegalized by the state, and those people who organized these things could be considered as the conveners of these acts of civil disobedience and could therefore be criminalized by the state. And especially in Spain, you have quite tough fines for this. You could even be imprisoned for a couple of years for being an organizer of acts of civil disobedience. Therefore, this led towards that you have a very specific form of how this assembly is being represented in this artwork. So there are actually two different ways of how this assembly is being brought here into the film. This is the second one. The first is a bit more common. It's the pixelation. I just did not only the pixelation over the eyes, because this is very often brought into connection with criminals. These are not criminals. These are people who fight for life, or fight for the earth. And this one is a bit more complicated. I used actually the outlines of the people in the assembly and filled these outlines through imagery I recorded in this action of civil disobedience that took place a couple of days later, and through the material of the training action. So this is the training action. So what you can see here, so this is the wall of the place where the assembly took place, and these are three heads. So I think here a fourth already starts. There are also, I worked with 3 different cameras. So you have close-ups, and you have shots where the entire scenery is visible in front of the camera. So I edited in a way as if the people would be visible, and then in the last stage of the production, I just deleted the faces in order to avoid the criminalization.
Okay, thank you. but organizers were in collaboration with you from the start, right?
Sure, sure. Okay. And yeah, so you can also hear how they communicate with me, because the film process was, of course, something that made this assembly different from all other assemblies they had before. But you can also learn a lot through this film, for example, how these different movements form together in different working groups. They take over different responsibilities and different tasks that could be like press, or it could be food, or it could be finance, or it could be police, negotiation. It could be legal, because always a few people get arrested, and then there are certain lawyers who try to get them out of the prison again. And so there are certain work groups that take over a specific responsibility, and you learn all of this. It's not like put
strategy.
There point after point, but you learn it through listening to it, and you will find it out through listening to this 37-long film. Not Sinking, Swarming is the title of it.
Thank you. Now we're going to move across the space, empty space, to learn about the roles of art, culture, and producer in a climate movement.
That's
so follow us.
Just follow us. So I followed a couple of different social movements over the years. One movement was, for example, the alter globalization movement, sometimes also described as the counter globalization movement, or anti-capitalist movement, or movement of the movements, depending on context. And in this movement, I observed in different events like European or World Social Fora that there is kind of an presence of the arts, but it's not directly included. So you saw kind of a separation between political events and cultural events, having the film screening or the dance performance at the end after a day of political discussion. And I saw and I experienced that within the climate justice movement, this is different. And I see that the art is much more embedded within political discussions and with organizing the movement. And in this film, Barricade Cultures of the Future, we see 5 protagonists of the climate justice movement who come from different regions, come from different backgrounds, and all of them are also practicing artists. And all of them, they have different art practices, and they also found different methods of how to relate their artistic work and their activist work. There are some word more merges, where you almost can't see the difference anymore, and some where the distinction, there's still kind of a boundary. And here in this film, they discuss about strategies, how to build a movement. And yeah, you can also see that they discuss from different positions. This is Jay Jordan, for example, from the Laboratory of Insurrectionary Imagination. He's also living at the ZAD. We talked about the ZAD just before. We have here a woman, Martha Moreno, from the Extinction Rebellion. We have here Steve Lyons, who is kind of a member of the Natural History Museum, a pop-up museum built by Not an Alternative in 2014, that also work together in different collaborative projects with different actors who can be seen as part of the climate justice movement. So they all have their different methods and their different way of working. And here it's being discussed about what can be the role in the movement. And I think they all agree that it's super important that artists and cultural producers participate in it, because almost by definition, what's the idea and role of the art? Usually it's about going beyond existing boundaries and trying out something new. So there's also almost this natural linkage. If you want to do something in order to change reality, why not collaborating with the central actor who is into changing reality and saving our livelihood, the climate justice movement? So therefore, there's almost a natural connection of how these actors should work together. And this is what the film is about.
Okay, just one short question.
Yes.
Why you use technique of erasing the background, this chroma key surface?
So this film was carried out in a film studio in Graz. And it's a green space which gives the possibility then in the post-production to insert different colors which create a certain structure, that certain parts of the film are being underlined or highlighted with a specific color. But it also gives the possibility to add the visual material footage that's kind of connected to what they are saying, their oral animations. So it allows a more playful way to combine different elements with each other than it would be when I document something in public space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we're going to move to the other part of the exhibition, presenting the, in my opinion, most complex topic about obfuscating, creating the fog.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the new technology that will save the planet, but actually we are talking about producing more profit for some and more death to planet.
Right.
So follow us.
Yeah.
Oliver will talk now about corporate solutions, which are actually not solutions, but a trap to convince us that technology are working for us, but instead they're doing just opposite. Please, Oliver.
Yeah, so this is actually a film I was planning to do already many years before, but it was super complicated first to get funding for it and later on to get shooting permissions of it. But I started to work on this in about at the same time when I started to work on Everything's Coming Together while Everything's Falling Apart. But it required like 4 years to get it done. So this is a film on carbon capture and storage, very often described as CCS. And this is a technology corporations, petroleum corporations, want to present to us as a solution for the climate emergency. And it's a quite, it's a technique where what's presented here in the refinery process of petroleum, the carbon should be absorbed and being pumped in old depots where originally there was petroleum. And it should be stored usually like underground. And this is a process that requires huge amounts of energy. And if you want to create these huge amounts of energy, then it might almost lead towards that we are forced to extract even more petroleum in order to get the energy for this extremely inefficient technology. Inefficient for people who have an interest in decarbonization and maintaining the atmosphere in a way as it has been in the past million of years. Maybe very efficient from the side of the corporation because they want to sell this technology as a climate technology and it should be subsidized by the state and therefore by our taxpayers' money. So no. I think there's no way to give those corporations that are to a large extent responsible for the climate destruction our taxpayers' money in order to become even richer. I think these guys should go to court. They should be imprisoned. And I think there are several people, NGOs, movements who also try to bring them to court. There is a trial against Shell, for example, which was very successful and which also for the first time forced them to really pay huge amounts of money as compensation for damage they did in Africa, in Nigeria. So I think there are certain things that show that the movement can have successes. And this piece was recorded at the Mongstad, at the Technology Center Mongstad, which is the largest research facility for CCS, for carbon capture and storage. So this guy is working there. He's at the moment being attacked by this bird. But yeah, sometimes nature does not accept corporations intervening in the where they are living. So he is kind of trying to explain why this is really the best solution, and it's heavily subsidized by the Norwegian state, one of the largest petroleum producers in the world. Equinor is a state-owned petroleum corporation, and they also co-fund this TCM, and also Shell and Total and other petroleum corporations are part of it. So the film is organized in 4 different chapters that are also visually and conceptually quite different. I felt this is such a complicated thing that maybe I should try different approaches, a letter, kind of a documentation where I present the corporate side, then something that almost appears like a manifest that's more or less analyzing and criticizing and destroying these arguments laid out by this guy in the yellow jacket. And the 4th is like a look into the future, an outlook into the future, which again comes in a different format.
Thank you.
Yes.
So shall go to hell.
Right.
And we are going just real near to talk about with Claudia Schioppa. Claudia? Okay. All together now?
Yes.
It's my pleasure to present Claudia Schioppa, artist who collaborated with Oliver on this piece behind us. And I will ask Claudia to tell us a few sentences, what is this work about?
Okay.
Talk loud, okay, because we have only 2 mics.
Okay. This work is about the world mass extinctions of animals and species of the earth, and basically I worked on every letter insert inside animals, ordered by shapes, gray tones, and whatever, for consent you to see this work from far and reading all the sentence and getting physically closer, being able to distinguish every animal and understanding the large amount of species that now are going to die. And this is almost 10 meters of paper containing animals and fauna and flora of the our world, and and this is just a little part. So yeah.
Thank you. So you will see that every letter of property will cost us Earth had the list of endangered species and animals who are about to, as you said,
yes,
die.
To extinct.
Yes. Oliver, can you tell us a little bit more about your idea of property?
Well, this quote is property will cost us the Earth is a quote from the Swedish scientist Andreas Malm from his book How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And in this book, he lays out a couple of different arguments, but one of them is that he argues quite clearly that he says that it won't be successful to tackle global warming without targeting capital, because most things will not work if you leave intact existing power relationships and this completely uneven distribution of wealth and property, where so few of us have so much in their hands and the majority of us has not that much. So this also brings it together that there is this responsibility of, it's just 71% of the corporations, no, sorry, it's 71% of the carbon emissions for which 100 corporations are responsible. And there's also this direct link between climate destruction and also the extinction of animals. So at the moment we are living in which scientists called the 6th mass extinction event. The 5th mass extinction event, these were the dinosaurs when they died, right? So you see, and according to the scientists, now animals are dying at a faster speed than the dinosaurs were dying during the 5th mass extinction event. So it's really serious. Every day, according to scientists, 200 species are dying on this planet.
That we know of.
That we know of.
Yes.
Probably the number is higher, yeah? But 200 per day we are knowing. We know are dying. Okay. And Claudia, in this wonderful 9-meter long ink drawing, was kind of drawing more than 400 of these species that are on this icon list of endangered species that includes 36,500 species that are categorized by scientists. It says at the very beginning, this webpage says that the real number is much higher, but this is what our scientists are able to categorize, that these are close to extinction.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Oliver. And one more artwork. Yes. It's usually saying that artists are always criticizing the existing systems, and they're not offering solution, and therefore we are offering solution for real near future. Oliver envisaged how the future will look like on the following piece, so follow us, and this is our last presenting work. So just around the corner.
So this piece here is a series of 6 photographic works titled Reclaiming Abundance. It's a commissioned work I did for an exhibition that opened at the beginning of the year in the Kunsthaus Graz. And they asked me to produce work where I could imagine or think about this relation of the today and how society might look like in 30 years. And as this exhibition took place in Styria, in the very south of Austria, I decided to pick out 6 infrastructures that were all heavily dependent on carbon, on fossil fuels. And I was thinking about different solutions for them. So here, for example, we should actually point first to the small image here in the legend. This is Austria's largest gas-fired power plant, and it's still active. And of course, even though gas is a bit cleaner than firing coal, it's heavily polluting, and so therefore this has to be closed as well. And it's directly near the river Mur, which is in the Styria. And I was looking at old maps, and 250 years ago the Mur was not regulated like one river flowing like straight ahead, but it was there in multiple small arms, and in between there were forests, and when it was flooded, it was also flooding the close by areas. And actually this entire region is super fertile, but it's not so fertile anymore because this natural flooding that contributes to the fertility of this environment there is kind of lacking. So to bring this back a bit into how it might have functioned as an ecosystem 250 years ago also helps the farmers around to reduce the amount of fertilizers they're using. You also reduce the speed the water is running, and you keep the water more also there in the region. So you see that this is being brought back as it looked like 250 years ago, but this, I thought, would be nice to leave it there. It's dysfunctional, but it stays there like a monument for the failure of fossilized capitalism.
Okay.
And there, yeah, I'm too long.
Yes. Now tell us, we like to go for skiing in Austria. Tell us what will happen in a few years with the skiing places.
So skiing is a complicated thing because if we do not want to have artificial snow, because it's also done with electricity, and we know how the majority of electricity is being produced. So, and the people go there by car and maybe drive 300 kilometers and all these ugly things. So what I did for this is that I transformed Austria's largest ski flying hill at the Kulm mountain to a summer sledge track, because even though we are in a climate emergency, I think we are still human beings, and we deserve some leisure and fun, and so therefore this is being transformed into something that can be active and can be used like 12 months per year, because there won't be any snow anymore on 1,100 meters above sea level.
Okay.
Yes.
So the future is not that gloomy.
Yes.
If we try to be active in this transformation of our society. Thank you, Oliver. This is the end of our guiding tour, and you will be available for individual questions and talks. And I thank you really. I'm thankful for this guided tour, and please give him a big applause.
Thank you.
Oliver Ressler, ladies and gentlemen.